don't think I need to say anything here.
Okay, stay out.
Not really sure what he was trying to do with that.
Welcome to the nerve centre of Formula One's broadcast operation and to the F1 Weekend Debrief, a new programme bringing you unseen footage and insights from the previous race. Let's start with the opening round of the 2019 FIA Formula One World Championship, the Australian Grand Prix. If it happened in Albert Park, Melbourne, we saw it here in F1's remote operations centre. Every camera, every microphone, every team radio message came through this room. Of course, at the track in Australia, there were 20 drivers and each one had their own story to tell. So whether it's from the onboard cameras positioned around the car or the 360-degree cameras placed on top of the chassis, there's nowhere to hide and we've got the lot. And with us to uncover some of those hidden gems is our own technical supremo, Rob Smedley. Rob, welcome. Let's get straight into it, shall we? The best race of my life. That's how, not mine, it's how Valtteri Bottas described his win by 20 seconds from Lewis Hamilton in an identical Mercedes. Doesn't happen very often, that kind of thing, does it?
No, it's very few times that we've seen Lewis beaten by that margin. But you know, I think that's exactly what we did see. We did see the best day of Valtteri's life in a racing car. I think he was absolutely pitch perfect from start to finish. You know, he's got his nose in front at the first corner and he's gone from there.
We'll have a look at the start in a second, but I mean, what does a driver, you know, when he has a perfect day, the setup is right, he's in the rhythm and everything is fine, does he come back to an engineering room, speak to you and says, I've got nothing to say, nothing to complain about, it was all just perfect?
Yeah, when drivers have days like that, then usually they're very pretty much sanguine about everything, about life in general. But you can see it's not always just the day. It's the weekend as well. You know, it's the whole lead up to it, and you know, when you've done it for a while, you can see a driver come in and be a little bit grumpy on a Thursday and know that the weekend maybe isn't going to go that well, and you can see them come in and just have the attitude that Valtteri's probably had right throughout this weekend, and everything seems to fall in their place, and they get the result in the end.
Well, it was a win really made from a great start off P2 on the grid. And we managed to put Hamilton's and Bottas's starts from an onboard camera simultaneously side by side. And what can we see here?
Right, well, I think the first thing you notice is actually the reaction time between the two drivers is very similar. So that's nothing to do with the start that Valtteri got away. But I think what you can see, and it's down there on your screen, is that Valtteri's getting up through the gears much quicker. He's got a lot more grip there. Whether that's a tyre conditioning thing, a tyre temperature thing, then Mercedes will have the answer to that.
Yeah, I mean 9/10 of a second quicker going through the gears. That's quite a lot.
Well, it's a huge amount once you get to 300 kilometres an hour at turn one. I mean, obviously Valtteri's got his nose ahead there, and he's been able to get away with it.
So if we have a look at it again in slow motion, then I mean, it could have been anything. Hamilton was on pole. He could have been, his clutch could have been overheated or whatever. I mean, we don't know at this point. It's just that it made Bottas's race.
It did make Bottas's race, and I think that's the key point, is that Valtteri had the race of his life because he got in front at that first corner. And once you know, drivers with a clean track in front of them usually perform an order of magnitude better than drivers with another 10 or 15 cars in front of them.
Well, he certainly did, didn't he, Valtteri? I mean, you know, from that point on, there was no looking back, and he wasn't challenged by Lewis Hamilton from behind. But we found out after the race that Hamilton had indeed sustained some damage to his car. Now, a crucial part of the flaw. Let's take a look at this and explain what we're looking at and why it made a difference to Hamilton's downforce, basically.
Right, so what you're looking at there is the floor area which is on the bottom right of the screen. And you can see the upper picture, which is before the damage, and that's got, so where the red line is, that top louver, the job of that top louver is to direct some of the airflow that's coming across the top of the car, and trying to form a skirt to stop the tyre squirt getting into the diffuser. Once that's gone, actually the damage can be reasonably sufficient. But I think more than that, what it does is because it's at the rear of the car, it's going to upset the car's balance, so that it's going to put his car much more into oversteer. And I think at the end of the race, you heard Lewis talking about the car being quite neutral, and he was a little bit upset with the balance, or he wasn't enamoured with the balance, let's say. And definitely that can be a cause of that.
Well, because he was saying, wasn't he, in the middle of the race, I'm not sure these tyres are going to make it to the end. Presumably, if there was a little bit of oversteer because he didn't have the downforce, that would have worn the rear tyres, giving him that fear that he wasn't going to make it to the end on that set.
Well, I think that's always a sensation of the drivers. If they're feeling oversteer, if the car's a little bit looser on the rear end, then obviously they have the sensation that, you know, gee whiz, I've got to do 30 laps, 40 laps on these tyres, whatever the stint is, which is a long way. And if you're already starting off the stint with a feeling of oversteer, they'll quite often feel that they're not going to get to the end. You know, and usually they've got a good feeling. So I guess that's what he was feeling. He was feeling the effects of losing aerodynamic stability, of losing some of the downforce that the diffuser generates probably from quite early on in the race.
Okay, you've taken a little bit of a delve into Hamilton's strategy, haven't you, of what he did next after losing the lead to Bottas. What have you found?
Well, I think it's quite interesting, and I think we all might have missed this. We might have missed a masterclass from Lewis, in that when he comes out and he's just in front of Sebastian, who's at the cover. And then Sebastian spends a long time sat right on his gearbox, and you think at that point, well, Sebastian must be quicker. Then Max comes out behind the pair of them. He's been unleashed to get on with it with his new tyres on, and there's Sebastian in front of him. Sebastian in front of him's been tapped up by Lewis, and Max duly gets past. It's a great move. But what happens afterwards is really telling, because all of a sudden, Lewis's lap time speed up by around about between half a second and a second, even a little bit more. So if you look at that period where he had Sebastian right behind him, his lap time suddenly increased, and that's because he's now under pressure from Max. So, you know, he's done a great job there. He's kind of maximised his result, especially against Sebastian.
Ah, clever old Lewis. Okay, well, listen, we'll have a look a little bit more about how Verstappen did, about Honda, and what happened to Ferrari in a second. But also at the start, homeboy Daniel Ricciardo's race kind of ended realistically after a couple of 100 metres. But this is a bit of a strange one. I haven't seen a front wing taken off like this before.
Right, so here's the view from the 360 camera. So you can see Daniel gets going. He has to move over to the right to get out of the way of Perez. He's made a great start. There's a depression there that he goes over. That's the storm drain where he's gone over. So the grey bit is the asphalt. The red box is showing you where all of a sudden the grass comes back up. His front wing takes the brunt of that, and off it comes.
It's unfortunate, really, because he did get a good start, didn't he? But as we can see now from the main shot, I mean, after that was quite a significant damage, and he did have to retire in the end. There was more damage than just putting a new nose and front wing on it.
Well, I think that's the problem, because as the front wing comes off, you know, it's snapped off at the pillars, and then it drags its way all under the bottom of the car. So you're going to get a lot of diffuser damage, a lot of rear floor corner damage, and probably there was some significant damage around the front of the side pods as well. So you know, there's a lot of damage to the car then. These cars are so aerodynamically sensitive that once you start changing them, they don't go very well.
Yeah, well, unfortunately for Ricciardo, not a great Australian Grand Prix. And you've got to say, not a great Australian Grand Prix for Sebastian Vettel and Ferrari as well. And where did we all go wrong after looking at Barcelona testing? Because I went out there, the car looked like it was on rails in Barcelona, and then only 4th and 5th in Australia. Why?
You know, it's something that both teams probably haven't got a full handle on themselves. But I mean, you know, if you look at the bits that we do know, I mean, one of the key points here, I think, is the Barcelona circuit itself. It has a very strange asphalt since it got resurfaced some years back, a couple of years back. And we've had some quite strange results. I remember at Williams, you know, trying to understand what the car was doing there during the last winter testing was not entirely straightforward. So you've got that in the mix. Is that coming out of Barcelona, you should never really underestimate the fact that track is quite different. Then you go to a different track in itself, in Australia, and it's got a different aerodynamic efficiency, it's got a different asphalt type, it's got a different corner type, you know, and the trend of Mercedes from the back end of winter testing going into Australia was that they were getting quicker and quicker and quicker. And so that, I guess what they've done is they've probably been able to take away what they've learned from Barcelona and translate that into more lap time in Australia.
Right, so while Ferrari might have been steady from testing and then going on a plane to Australia, Mercedes were just learning all the time and much quicker.
Yeah, I think, you know, the first, from like the second day or something like that, the second day they were 7 tenths behind. You know, this is tyre and fuel corrected as much as we know. And then that was 3 tenths behind, and then on the final day they were actually on par with Ferrari. So there's a clear trajectory there.
But a couple of other interesting things just as we wrap up Melbourne though, Rob. First of all, Honda being on the podium, we saw a Honda engine, Max Verstappen overtaking Sebastian Vettel. They've done an amazing job over the winter.
They have done an amazing job. You know, we'll hope that we can get into a little bit more analysis there in due course once we've got more races under our belt. But I think that they've done an amazing job. They had excellent reliability, obviously. You can't take it away from what Max actually did, because Max made a great overtaking manoeuvre. But yeah, I think that Honda's just going from strength to strength, and it's good for the sport.
And the other thing is, I mean, what's your take on how the new technical regulations have actually, what they've done to the cars and how they've affected the racing?
Well, I think that, you know, when I sat on this other side of the fence last year and we were chatting about, you know, we talked this through in the technical working group meetings, which is the meetings that the teams have with the FIA, we were all of pretty much the same consensus that the cars would probably be more stable, and they are, and therefore easy to drive, more stable aerodynamically, but they would be slower. But I think what we've ended up with is actually a car that's more stable, so it's done as the rules have intended, but the cars are actually quicker. You know, if you look at the top 3 teams, I think on average they're about half a second quicker than they were in Melbourne last year. So if you take the trajectory of development over the course of a season from Australia 2018 to Abu Dhabi 2018, then the cars are probably about as quick as they were in Abu Dhabi, which is an incredible job by the teams.
Well, it was a step into the unknown for 4 drivers on the grid as rookies George Russell, Lando Norris and Alexander Albon all started their first Formula One Grand Prix. And Charles Leclerc, while of course not a rookie, did start his first race for the famous Scuderia Ferrari. So, before we get the engineers' view on how they did, we spoke to a few wise heads in the paddock to see what their expectations were of these drivers before the first race. First, how would Leclerc go up against Vettel?
I think he can be a very tough competitor for Sebastian, because the pressure is not as high as on Sebastian. I mean, if the Ferrari is running well, then everybody expects from Sebastian to become world champion.
Leclerc is pretty much my candidate for the world title. I really hope he exceeds expectations. He has a lot of expectations on him, but I do think that he's got what it takes. He's very calm, which Vettel is not or hasn't been in the past few years, and he doesn't make mistakes. So that's why I think he's going to surprise a lot of people.
I mean, if you look at what Charles has done, in every category that he's gone into, he's been quick. And then in Formula One, he wasn't quick straight away, which was kind of a surprise. But then he went away and thought about why he wasn't. He's been quick in testing, he looks very competent, he hasn't made mistakes. So I expect him to be quick from the get-go.
Leclerc will give a good opponent for Vettel, for sure. But I think Vettel takes this year. Maybe next season is different.
Well, you never know. I mean, Leclerc could be challenging for the championship if the Ferrari is as strong as we think it might be in Bahrain and other places. But in qualifying, at least, Leclerc was 3 tenths slower than Vettel.
Oh, it's very early days yet. I mean, Australia is a difficult track at the best of times. You know, he's just getting used to having a car that quick underneath him. We saw that he perhaps took a little bit of time to get his feet under the table at Sauber, but once he did, he was unstoppable. I think it'll be a good battle between them. You know, as you say, he gave away a little bit in qualifying, but in the race he had a really good race.
In the race, yeah. I mean, what did you take of it from that?
Well, I think, you know, there were 2 very, very different races between Sebastian and Charles in that Charles, you know, ran, especially the second part of his race in free air. He stopped a lot later than Sebastian, who had perhaps compromised his race a little bit with that very early stop. So I think there was about a 15 lap tyre age differential, and that makes all the difference. So he was able to catch Sebastian quite quickly. He was on the hard tyre as well. We haven't got to forget that. Yep. Sebastian was complaining he couldn't get the medium working. Charles was probably a lot happier on that hard. So, you know, I think that at that stage in the race there was a big differential, but that's very explainable.
Okay, well, let's get into the proper rookies, shall we? And first at McLaren, Lando Norris, who's teamed up against Carlos Sainz, who's moved from Renault to McLaren to replace Fernando Alonso.
I think Lando Norris is very interesting because he's one of the drivers that came from the simulators, and he's one of these new drivers who come from a completely different path. I still think Carlos is going to beat him in his first year, but I think he's going to do a good job.
I was impressed how Lando did in the smaller categories and up to Formula One. I think it might be a quite tight battle between him and Sainz.
Sainz, yeah. More experience and both new drivers in McLaren, obviously, but I would say experience wins this time.
Carlos is very experienced and very quick. Lando is, some people think Lando's been promoted a year too soon. I tend to disagree with that. I think anyone expecting him to do a Lewis is being unfair to him. But I do think he'll shine.
Do you know what? I probably would have said Sainz too, but man, did Lando prove us wrong, me wrong, in qualifying. 8th, outstanding.
Yeah, I think the lap that he did in, well, a few laps that he did on Saturday afternoon were absolutely outstanding, and especially given that he hadn't been able to get on top of the car up until that point. You know, I think where Carlos was in the first 3 practices and probably qualifying was where we expected McLaren to be, which is a great step forward. I mean, you haven't got to forget that. But what Lando did on Saturday afternoon was amazing. I mean, hats off to the young lad. I think he's done a really good job there.
And we look at Lando Norris next to cross the line. Norris over the line now, goes 9th. At the moment, he's in Q3 on his debut.
Lando Norris in, once again, the outstanding lap, I would say, of that session. Lando Norris in his first ever Grand Prix in the McLaren.
And in the race, he got done by the Giovinazzi train, didn't he?
Yeah, a little bit. But you know, he was cool, he was calm, he was collected. You know, he did the race, and I think that if you look back at the 2018 version of McLaren, and you put a rookie in that, and he finished 12th. You know, he qualified 8th and finished 12th. So you know, very good chance of scoring points. You know, the team would be very happy with that, and I guess they're over the moon with how Lando's equipped himself in that first race.
Okay, well, it was a brand new driver lineup at Toro Rosso as well, with the returning Danny Kvyat up against the Thai driver Alexander Albon.
Albon, for me, might be the biggest surprise in the whole field, because when you hear to people who raced against him in the past, like Charles, for example, Charles thinks very high about Albon. He said he should have been in Formula One a long time ago already, because he's real good stuff. I think in the end, Albon might win the battle against Kvyat.
I would say Kvyat, yeah, and because he has more experience, and now 3rd time tells the truth, how they say in English. In Finland we say like that, but yeah, so now it's his time.
And I think Albon is the one that he doesn't have to prove himself. He's just here, he has to enjoy his chance, and he did a pretty good championship in Formula 2 last year, so I think he'll do a very good job.
Well, not only did Alexander Albon out-qualify Danny Kvyat, in fact, all 3 rookies out-qualified their more experienced teammates. But in the race, Albon wasn't too shabby as well. But I know you admired what Danny Kvyat did in the race.
Yeah, I did, yeah, because I think that, you know, it's kind of when you're making that comparison, a rookie comparison against his teammate, you expect a really experienced teammate. But we've not got to forget that Daniel's been out of Formula One for a year and a half, and he's equipped himself very well. You know, I mean, when we looked at him in Williams, it was always very clear that he was hugely quick, but perhaps didn't have his head in the right place. And I think this is a great start for him. I hope this takes him on to a better season.
It was P10 and a point for Danny Kvyat. But our last rookie is George Russell, the reigning Formula 2 champion, and he's up against not a rookie but another returnee, and that's Robert Kubica, after, of course, let's not forget, 8 years away from racing.
I would say Russell beats Kubica because, of course, he has been away for so long, Kubica, and he said even in Barcelona that this season will be really tough for him.
Everybody hopes Kubica to do well after all he had been through, but Russell is definitely probably the most matured of the newcomers. So you have to believe he's very quick,
I think Robert's experience is going to help him a lot. You know, he might have lost a little bit of speed, but he's smart. He always had good racecraft, and that may be what helps him score over George.
Maybe people think, oh, who is this George Russell? He's not doing that well, but I think in Formula One, people will see that he's a very good driver, and I think he's the best of the new drivers on the grid.
Well, George Russell pretty much highly rated by everybody we could find in the paddock, and he certainly did have a very solid weekend.
He was great. He was really good, I think, for a guy of his age. He's definitely one of the stars of the future. You know, I know George a little bit from my time at Williams, and he equips himself very well as he's done this weekend. I think it's a difficult rookie comparison because Robert's been out of the car for 8 years, so Robert's more like a rookie himself. But you know, it'll unfold over the season, and you know, let's all get behind George.
Yep. Okay. Well, we've got our opinions about the rookies. If you've got any opinions or any questions that you want to put to us here, then just send us a tweet. Put the hashtag F1 Weekend Debrief, and we'll answer some of those questions that hopefully you've got after the weekend in Bahrain.
What a picture the Sakir circuit looks.
What utter brilliant madness!
Under the lights, he's got the power turned up to 11. And they make contact!
Oh no!
Grazie ragazzi, mamma mia, mamma mia.
Yeah, looking forward to that one. 29th to the 31st of March in Sakir in Bahrain. Could be a very good race there.
Yeah, I think we're going to get a much more. It's a much more typical track.
Right.
A much more typical track. The aerodynamic efficiency is much more typical to what we'll see for the rest of the season. We race in the twilight, going into the dark, so the track temperature is not going to be as elevated as Melbourne. So I think, you know, we could see something quite different to what we've seen in Melbourne.
What do you mean by that? You mean a Ferrari coming back and showing the promise from testing?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they're going to go away. They're going to do their homework. They're going to try, see how they can get a little bit more out of that car. You know, I'm sure that people are going to be bringing upgrades as well, and let's hope that we see a closer battle there at the front.
Okay, Rob, thank you very much for the time being. That's almost it for us, but really we can't close before paying our appreciation to the life and achievements of Charlie Whiting. The FIA Director of Formula One, really practically speaking, ran F1 races day to day, didn't he? He made the rules, he governed them, he kept the drivers honest in penalties, and more than that, he kept the drivers safe. He was an absolute trailblazer for safety in Formula One, and taken too soon from us. Rob, what are your memories of Charlie?
Only positive, you know. What a man. He was a good friend to a lot of us. So it's come as a really huge shock, and yeah, really difficult time, you know, especially for his family. My thoughts go out to his wife and kids. Just an incredibly difficult time. But you know, I think now it's becoming apparent what Charlie did, you know, to all of us involved in the sport, whether on the sporting side or the technical side. It was always really clear that he was doing like 5 jobs. The guy had incredible bandwidth, and it's easy to have bandwidth, but you need to have bandwidth and be effective, and Charlie was just that. You know, he did a lot on the sporting side that you've already touched on, a lot on the safety side. He you know, up until a year or two ago, he used to run all the TWG meetings as well, the technical meetings. So the guy was incredible, you know, but a very fair guy, a very honest guy. You know, you never ever had the feeling with Charlie that there was anything underhand going on.
No, indeed so. Rob, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for watching as well. We'll be back following the Bahrain Grand Prix.